Hello, this is the HarpDialogue. This is already the sixth HarpDialogue, and I'm very thankful for first to all the patrons who are supporting that on the Patreon, because that's a big motivation for me to keep working. Today we have Park Stickney. First of all, great friend of mine, and even we were so much across the world. So we met just 3 times, I think, or 4 times maximum. And but it was always very interesting. It was always very warm, and first of all, with a lot of fresh emotions, freedom. So today I don't want to speak a lot about the biography. You have your website, and there is wonderful press pack with the biography, photos, everything for everybody to understand. So first of all, hello.
Hello.
Yeah. So you work in minimum 3 conservatories right now, yes?
Yes, I'm teaching actually in 4 right now. I'm teaching in Lyon at the Conservatory with Fabrice Pierre and Sylvain Blassel, Conservatoire National Supérieur. I'm an assistant. Sylvain and I, we share the assistant job. And I'm teaching also in London at the Royal Academy of Music, and I've done that for a long time, for, I don't know, 13 or 14 years. I've been in Lyon for 10 years. In London, my official title is I am the jazz harp tutor, which means that I work with all the students a little bit every year in the winter trimester, and then they have an exam. And I'm also running a master's program in Milan. This is the second time I've done this. It's called the New Language for harp. So it's not strictly jazz, although it uses jazz tools and language to help the students to go in whatever direction they want to go. So they usually come with a project and with a desire, and then we use some of these jazz tools to allow them to realize their dreams. And then the last place I'm teaching regularly is in Lausanne, not far from here, at the conservatory, where I do an improvisational course for the classical harpists.
Ah, cool.
So yeah, so I run around, but not a lot less right now. Although I'm still teaching with internet with Lyon and with Milan. So it's okay. I think this anyway comes back to normal. Some kind of normal.
Some kind of new normal.
Like. We
new
see.
Normal, as we say. So tell us, where are you? Where are you right now, and how this situation with the virus and everything affected your life? So what you do right now and where you do that?
Okay, so right now in general, before this, I was dividing my time, my home time, in 2 different places. I was living in Switzerland, which is where I am right now, and then in New York, in Brooklyn. In Switzerland, I'm in a small town with 240 people called Valais-sur-Oursin, which is in the French part of Switzerland. It's about 20 minutes from Lausanne. So it's near the lake of Neuchâtel. It's a very nice small farming community. And so when things really started shutting down because of the virus, I was on tour. I was in London on my way to Cannes for a festival. And then as for all of us, for you as well, I think, Sasha, that things just started like falling cards, stopping one after the other. So I came back here, and I've been here since then. And I've been actually really busy. I don't know. I have a feeling that everyone I talk to seems to be busy in this time, because I think maybe as musicians we have the ability, since our work exists and also is completely made up in some ways, we have the ability to create something out of nothing. So I found myself very busy right now because in addition to teaching, I'm also a student. Now I'm doing a PhD in London at Trinity Laban Conservatory. And as I'm supposed to be finishing this year, I have lots of work. In fact, that's what today I was because my PhD, we can talk about this as much as you want or as little. It's half and half between composing and writing, and so I have a big deadline for the writing bit in a week. So today I was working all day writing about that, and I was worried knowing I was looking forward to our conversation, but I was also worried that I was going to be too cranky after a day of writing and thinking deep, dark thoughts, that I was going to be too angry to be friendly. But so far I'm feeling very friendly, so let me know if it
So far, so good.
changes. So basically, while I'm here, I've been teaching by Zoom and Skype and Teams, and I've been working on my thesis, and I've been recording a lot. I have a recording project with a composer named Nick Harvey in London. So we've been composing an album together, sending tracks back and forth, and he's doing electronic things to them, and so that's been really interesting from the recording side of things for me. And I have a new project that I'd like to plug, but that I've been it's something I wanted to do for a while, which I finally am setting up now, which is a virtual harp camp. I do a harp camp in Valais every so often, every couple of years, where harpists come from around the world, and they stay here, and we sort of take over the town with jazz harp for a week. And now I realized, thanks to my teaching in Milan, which has been all virtual with this new class, I realized that to sort of address in a very basic way all of the for me important technical things takes about five meetings. That in five meetings we can talk about everything, and then it takes them the rest of their lives to digest and apply. But to be exposed to everything takes something like 7. That's what I predict. I'll find out more when I do this class. So I launched that this last week, and we'll start in a couple of weeks. And if you want to know more about it, you can find it on my website, which is harplab.net. That's the last plug.
That's awesome. Awesome.
And that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
That's all very inspiring, because there's a lot of things together. So as we were already touching your PhD, I think that is very interesting to hear how you got to this. I mean, what was your motivation? Because I think you was a student quite long time ago, and then you just resumed to make your PhD. And this is kind of the things which we are hoping to do when we are living our life busy with the concerts, and then just take the time and make a PhD. This is something very motivating. So tell us how you came to that, what you do, what is your topic?
Okay, wow. Well, first of all, I have to say that at one moment today, and I even wasn't thinking about the fact that we were going to speak later today, but I had this idea that I wanted to get on a worldwide stage like this and tell people, never do a PhD. It's a terrible, terrible idea. At one point, I was like, this is the worst idea I ever had, and now it's too late. I'm stuck inside. But no, it's the worst and also one of the best ideas I've ever had. The history of this idea is that actually, I mean, you can look at it different ways. But I think I always wanted to do a doctorate. Somehow it was always in my head. I always wanted to do a PhD, and I tried several different times. When I finished my master's degree, I was at New York at Juilliard, and I applied actually for the doctoral program. They just started a doctoral program, I think, when I was finishing my master's. And so I thought, oh, I'll stay here and do this if I can. And I wasn't accepted, and which was very not so much fun for me. Although I realized that in a way it was a lucky thing that I wasn't accepted, because I didn't want to. I realized I didn't want to be in school anymore. I wanted to go out and have adventures and live my life. But I still had this idea in my head somehow. And then I had and this is linked to my topic, I had some ideas, some theoretical ideas linked to, as I was progressing in my jazz harp playing, especially a thing called fast sevens, which is a specific approach to playing dominant seventh chords. And this idea, then I tried a second time to get enter a doctoral program, and it didn't work that time either. And I'm still not quite sure why it didn't work, because then suddenly I had sort of given up on this whole PhD idea. I thought, well, that's just not going to happen. But then I was in London, who teaches at Trinity, London, and she said, you should meet these two guys who are dealing with the doctoral program. I don't know if she even knew that I had in the back of my head that I'd already, put a cross on my PhD aspirations. But I met them, and they were really interesting people, and I sort of woke up this idea that I could do a doctorate again. So slowly I sort of ended up going there because it was possible. And yeah, I would have liked to have done this earlier than I'm doing it now. Although at the same time, it's been great because I've played the harps. Now I'm 51. So, and I played the harp since I was 7. So it's taken me 44 years to get to where I am right now. But I think that with this, as we talk about all the time, and this learning thing, is this reflective learning and sort of stepping out of the context of yourself to look at where you are and what you're doing and what things mean and what's important. And so this exercise, in some ways, this work I feel like I've learned how to read, and it's still an ongoing process. It's not just now I know how to read. I've learned how to read. I've learned how to write a little bit more. I've learned how to think a little bit more. All these things that I thought I had taken care of. So it's been a real growth thing. It's changed my teaching. It's changed my playing. It's changed my approach. I'm not finished yet, so I don't want to. I'm assuming that it's all going to go well and it's all going to be finished somehow. But it's been a really interesting process, and I'm really happy that this sort of happened, that I got to finish this, to close this loop. Now, what's the subject? So it deals with pedals. I mean, let's see how this is as you talk to anyone who's doing a PhD, it can take a long time. So let me just be clear about what the subject is.
Yeah. So the problem, and how you solve it. So
yeah. So I've always been fascinated by the pedals on the harp ever since, and I've always, and this also goes to sort of my origin story. When I was a kid, when people ask me, which I imagine we'll also talk about, how did I start to play jazz on the harp? What I think my real starting the jazz on the harp was that I was a terrible student. When I was first learning, I learned the harp one summer. There was a summer program, and it was a collective class, and you'd go and you'd learn together. And I loved this class, but I was really not doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was always inventing things or playing around with the harp or being silly with the harp, probably also just being silly in general. And at least that's what, maybe it's not true, but that's what I remember of that class, that I was always doing something else. And it continued, that I was always creating my own pieces. The years that followed, and the medleys and things. And so I think even though this wasn't jazz, it wasn't improvisation in the way that I think of it now. It was using the harp as a toy, using it not in the possible way that perhaps we think we should use it. Anyway, so I was always fooling around with the harp. And then it just so happened that 3 years later, when I was 10, there was the very first jazz and pop harp festival. Actually, they called it the Pop and Jazz Harp Festival, which was run by Salvi, and it was in California. And I think the idea was that there were enough harpists who were playing in restaurants, who were it was mostly playing arrangements, but weren't having a strictly classical job. And there were a few people who were doing more jazz things, what we consider jazz now, with improvisation and so on. But anyway, I went to this first festival. I competed in the competition, and at this festival, not only was it useful for me because I met a lot of the important jazz harpists of the day, and many of them who are dead now. So it was really lucky I got to meet them all. But I learned about the pedal slide, because even though there were, every day there was a theory class, and it was way over my head. I had no idea. I didn't know my key signatures. But they talked about this thing called the pedal slide, and this really changed my life. And so I was doing pedal slides all the time, and I think this is where my love for the pedals really started. That and the fact that also I switched. I'd start on a lever harp. I switched from lever to pedal harp for this festival, for this competition at the festival, because I was we had to make arrangements of tunes, and one of my arrangements, it was Somewhere Over the Rainbow. There were so many lever changes that my teacher suggested, well, it's a little early, but maybe you should switch to pedal harp. So it's all about that one moment at that festival in California, where I learned about pedals and I learned about pedal slides from the very beginning. So this exists, and I'm playing, and the playing become more in a jazz direction. I continue with my classical training. I go to New York and so on. But I'm playing a lot and doing a lot of gigs, and playing also in hotels and all this stuff. And now I arrive at what becomes my subject, because I discovered this thing called, which I call fast sevenths, which is the idea that you can play all of the 12 dominant seventh chords, the 5 chords that exist, because there are 12, because there's 12 notes that exist, C and F sharp and A flat and all those notes. And on every one of those notes, you can make a dominant seventh chord. So every one of those dominant seventh chords, you can play with one foot motion, meaning that with 2 qualifiers, you can't play the 5th of the chord, so you play the root, the 3rd, and the 7th, and you have to spell it using only naturals in sharps. So if you're making, for example, a B flat 7, you would make it as an A sharp, D, G sharp. But if you do it like this, then you have to only everything's on one side of the harp or the other side of the harp, and they're all neighboring notes. So you either playing no pedals, or sometimes you have 2 pedals at once or 3 pedals at once. So this multi-pedaling thing is a part of this fast sevenths, and this multi-pedaling idea became a big part of what my doctoral work is about. The official direction of my doctoral work is I think that we as harpists can be more in touch with our pedals. I have this idea. I mean, of course, it's a very safe thing to say, because we can always get better. It's like going to the gym. We can always get stronger. We can always get faster. But I have this feeling that the way that harpists who start with levers, I think of it like, this is it's a whole discussion, but I have this idea that harpists start often with a lever harp, and it's kind of, and then they have to switch to pedals, and it's annoying. And I think that a lot of harpists think about their pedals just as switches just to get these extra notes, rather than thinking of their feet as being part of the dance of playing the harp, that we're not just arms, we're arms and legs. We have 4 limbs which are always working. That the pedals, when they're not moving, that's when they're doing their job. When we think about moving the pedals all the time, but actually it's only in between. The pedals are doing their job when they're in a place holding the string at a certain length. So I think of the pedal situation kind of like a puberty, like, because you're alive. And just when you figure out how the world works and you know everything, when you're 10 or 11 or 12, and you suddenly, boom, puberty hits, and you're like, oh, actually, I don't know anything, and everything changes. And then you have a second puberty, like you're in your 20s, and you think, okay, now I've got it. Now I know. And suddenly, boom, you have to pay taxes, and you have to think, oh, okay, I don't know anything. And then I think that there's several different moments like this where you think, just when you figure everything out, life shows you know nothing. And maybe the last one is like, oh, and by the way, we're going to die and lose everything. Like, oh, I had it all figured out. And I think that the switch from lever harp to pedal harp might be in this same direction. We sort of resent it in a way. I think that I got around this in a way because I switched to pedal harp for my own arrangements, for my own playing, because I was acting as a composer, as an arranger, trying to find certain sounds. It wasn't that I had to do one more thing because some other composer had told me what to do and I was a victim. It empowered me. So my idea with this PhD, we're really on this path, I'm not, even though there's had lots of paths around, is that I think that we can be more kinesthetically, physically involved with our feet, equally with our feet as with our hands. And the way that this will work is through this fast seventh approach, through this multi-pedal, through pedal slides, through really using the pedals in as musical a way as possible. So to do that, I've written some pedal etudes, which use lots of different pedal ideas, and I'm also working with various composers, non-harpist composers, to get them to write pieces which use the pedals in the ways that I'm promoting, because I want to stop. I feel like that the composers tend to write pieces for harpists they tend to follow the instructions that harpists tell them about how the harp works and what's possible and what's not possible. So composers write these pieces and then harpists play these pieces, and there's this closed loop. So I want to break this loop and get the harpists really using, I bet that you're using multiple pedals at one time. And that's the interesting thing, is it's changing, of course. Because people are doing it. And actually, the other thing I have to admit is that, so I invented this idea for myself. I'd never heard of this double pedal thing. But of course, I'm not the first person to invent this. It's been, the single action harp did this all the time. You can look in the method books. They just say it. So it's not but what's interesting is that it sort of fell out of fashion. And I know it fell out of fashion because I spent years talking about fast sevenths, and I have a list of the kinds of questions, the ways I would phrase it to avoid getting people tell me that it wasn't possible, because I would always hear this: no, two pedals at once, not possible, too dangerous. Our feet are too small, our feet are too short, our feet are too weak. And of course, none of that is true because it happened 200 years ago. Yes, the single action harp has lighter action. Yes. But anyway, so that's what my research is on. It's really a project that started when I was 10 with his pedal slides, and then went through various geographical and elements. And luckily now I get to because the PhD itself, it's just an external form of the work I'm doing anyway. That's what's great about it. Is it allows me and forces me to focus. I would never have spent today thinking about the things I was thinking about and trying to make them clear on paper if I wasn't involved in that structure. But I would still be learning about pedals and what I can do with them. So that's it. Does that clear? Does that make sense? It's a lot of words. It's a lot of talking there.
No, that makes sense absolutely. And if there is some people who are like not harpists and they're wondering why we do care so much about the pedals, we should just say a little bit on the most easy level that pedals are quite new thing for the harp. If we can track the history of the harp for 6,000 years, then the pedals are just 300 years. Yes, this year is exactly 300 years since HOCHBRUCKER invented those pedal system, one action. It was.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, that was 1720 he invented that. So it's exactly 300 years.
Oh my God, this is perfect.
We have the harp, so as we are using it. And then after that, the Sebastian Erard invented 3 actions, so we can, and the Sebastian Erard invented also a double action for the piano, for Liszt, Ferenc Liszt. So basically he was just improving the instruments to let them play everything. And so the pedals are really, I have the same feeling. They are considered more like a problem for the harpist, like something what makes the life difficult. And what I like about what you say and what you work on is that here we speak about the pedals as the plus, as our tool to get more sounds, more effects, more combinations, and that's how we should consider that. So it's like a work in progress, which started 300 years ago, and somehow it's coming through you to the next level. That's very important. So let us just switch from the pedals. We will probably come back to that in the jazz when we will talk about jazz. But I wanted to ask you first how your career went. You was playing the lever harp, you started to play pedal harp, you started to play jazz. So what was your motivation to play jazz? I know that it was some kind of experiments what you was doing, but how when it's changed to play like a full jazz concerts and make all these arrangements, your own music, and so on and so on.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see, how did my life work? Because there's lots of chapters, of course. It's true that now for the last, let's say, 20 years, it's been pretty stable as far as what my real job, my performing job is, where I'm doing lots of solo concerts and then with some different groups. Yeah, okay, so let's see. How can I answer this question? So I was in New York, and there my performing life was like so many harpists in New York, basically playing just gigs, background gigs, and I wasn't. And I think that this is I had the feeling that this is maybe the difference between life in the States and life in Europe, or life in New York. In New York, there are so many musicians. There's such a high level. I don't know. I think it's hard to be an artist. I don't think anybody can say you're not. I don't think I'm an artist. I think that all I can do is try to be an artist, try to live my life in an artistic way. For sure, I'm a harpist. For sure, I'm a musician. I think I'm a musician, which is the next level up. But the highest level, I think, is that you're using these tools to say some kind of artistic statement. And occasionally, I think it works. So, but I think that in my period after school, or in between schools, I guess now, I was really a harpist and occasional musician, mostly a harpist. And I think it's hard to, for whatever reason, I didn't find the path to be really making the kind of music I wanted to make until I moved to Europe. Spent most of my time in Europe. So that sort of broke the cycle. I think that in New York, also there's so much stuff going on. It's so fast. It's easy to be so busy being important and running around that you forget to do the actual work you're supposed to be doing. So now, by spending a lot of time in this small town, ironically, it's forced me to, and small town, but also traveling around Europe. It's forced and allowed me to do the work I'm really supposed to be doing, I think, while still taking information from New York. So now, yeah, that's basically it. I was doing silly things, but that also, I mean, it was also necessary in a way, doing those background gigs and occasionally concerts, but it wasn't so clear. I mean, my life was I'd say 80% in that direction, and occasionally things would happen. But I played a lot. That's the thing, is that for me, the beginning of the jazz was not only that I was a bad student at the beginning, it's also that I was, in a way, lazy, because as I was playing these background gigs, I realized I didn't have to carry my music with me, that I didn't actually need the sheet music for these songs, because I wasn't playing the notes anyway. And that anyway, the other thing I realized, my point of honor was I would never repeat a song in the same gig because it's just too embarrassing. It's just too much. But I would be, of course, I could play it as long as I wanted to, but just never repeat it. So again, I would improvise on it. So spending hours and hours for several years, I was playing for these things all day, basically, once I left school. So all day improvising on these tunes. And I think that that's really was a training ground for some of the work I did later, in a way. So it wasn't lost, even though sometimes I think, I wonder if I could have escaped that earlier. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Then luckily, I found myself here. I guess it's really thanks to my wife, in a way, that because we were going back and forth, and we decided to switch. Rather than being mostly in New York with a little bit in Europe, we'd be mostly in Europe with 2/3 and 1/3. It changes all the time, especially now. And so when I was here, suddenly it broke that New York cycle, I guess, and I was finding myself doing more artistic kinds of things, and then that began a new spiral. So my life now is basically concerts, and I have several different groups, different projects, which come in and go out. It depends.
And how it works? You work for the agency management, or you just get the calls?
Different things. Most of it is people call me, but I have a manager in Germany, and he organizes some things, and but it's a combination. But most of the work comes that people call me, and occasionally I have projects where I go and try to make them happen myself. I had this duo with Rudiger Opperman, and we did a couple tours in the U.S. that I set up, but mostly, with internet, it's just it just happens like this.
Yeah, that's.
And now I have no idea. Now after COVID, I have no idea how it's going to be, but we find out.
Well, we find out. Do you have any idea how it would be after? What do you think? How we will live after that?
Wow, the crystal ball. Well, I think, okay, I know I have some concerts that are, I'm dealing with some concerts in the future, so always with the idea that maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't happen. I'm sure it's the same for you. They're in smaller venues, so I think there will be more smaller venues. I think that there will be some kind of a hybrid situation, because I think that when you have so many millions of people spending all this time online, as we're doing right now, we've really increased our knowledge of how it is to be online like this. And I think that this will spill over into concerts, and not the kinds of concerts we're seeing for the most part now, but like actual concerts. I mean, no, I'm not saying that they're not actual concerts now, but yeah, I think a lot of the concerts we're seeing now are sort of people are panicking because they didn't know what to, they have to do something, so they play. Me too. I think somebody says, "Do you want to play?" Yes, I'll play. But I think that venues will, even though they're already live streaming, the Berlin Phil is a great example. All their concerts are on you can see this. But I think it's going to become more and more normal, and that not only on the concert giving side, but also on the concert receiving side, that people will be more used, having spent some months doing that. They realize, oh, it's possible. Oh, it's not so bad. But I think it'll be both. I think they'll go to concerts, and I think they'll watch concerts around the world. Yeah, that's what I think.
I think the same. I think that there will be also new technologies, and maybe we will have experience like having an artist performing in several music halls around the world in the same moment, just with a hologram, or some new types of online concerts, because the quality is always not so good. So we will see. For me, it's also a big change, and I started actually, as you say, to work and publish everything. And I cleaned my Facebook, Instagram. I made 30 videos. I made a lot of new arrangements, and I started to publish that because people were thinking I'm selfish and that I just want to keep my arrangements for myself. But that's not true. I just didn't have this kind of quiet time in Switzerland, which It
takes so much time.
Yes.
It's amazing how much time it takes to do this. Because also, when you play it once and it goes off, it's in the concert, it's in the moment. But when you take your arrangement or your composition, you put it down by paper, it's a huge work, because you're trying to send a message to somebody you'll never meet. Exactly. Maybe after you're dead. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's like, that's what I think is always amazing working with the classical students, is that these composers, when they're trying to communicate with us, we have to always understand how hard it is to communicate. And we do it all the time. But there's a lot of, hidden stuff there.
Let's speak about jazz. I mean, now, and that's one of the questions people ask. When you was going your way, and I actually see that it's exactly what I think about the way, because you got a lot of frustration and energy in New York, in the big city. It could be London or it could be Moscow, and then you come to the quiet place like Switzerland, and then you release everything what you have into the artistic way, as you say. So that's perfect example. But what was your extra motivation? Did you listen to any jazz harpists of the past? Because I think there were much more of them before.
Yeah, I have listened to a lot of previous jazz harpists, but that wasn't necessarily my motivation. It wasn't that, because I was doing it, because I fell into it, because I was lucky. I was incredibly lucky. And so then afterwards, once I realized, oh, what I'm doing is jazz, I better figure out what this is a little bit. Oh, some other people have done this, so I should find out who they are. And don't forget that, a lot of the early jazz I listened to were these harpists that I met, like Dwayne Fulton. And of course, you can define jazz very widely, but harpists who are making their own music, basically, let's say, and playing popular music, so in Dipperhans and Conant, and my teacher for my undergrad, Carol McLaughlin, who was at that very first festival as well. We were in the same competition together. Luckily, she won and I didn't, because that would have been very awkward years later when she was my professor. But so no, it was more when I listened to these things, these other harpists, Dorothy Ashby, Alice Coltrane, etc., etc. It was more out of curiosity afterwards to see what paths they'd taken, because we were dealing with the same questions. So I wanted to see how they'd responded to these questions. So I think this is one of the advantages in a way that we still have. Maybe it's finished now. I don't know. I mean, I think about a saxophone player. If you're a saxophone player and you're playing jazz, then you have this huge history with so many players, and you have to, and you still have the job of finding your own sound. Because that's what ultimately our job is. Or deciding you want to be exactly, somebody else. But I don't think so. I think our real job is to find our who we are in this constellation of stuff. And to find that, you have to listen to so much, I guess. Or maybe not. Maybe you can just play what you want and then.
Yes, that's exactly. No, you are right. So just for the record, three albums. Yours, I understand. 3 names, just for the public.
I have to say, I'm terrible at this game, and I always get completely nervous. So, but I mean, the problem is that it's a cliche. I mean, Bill Evans, the pianist, is very important for me, as he is for everyone. So it doesn't really count. But I mean, I love Bill Evans. Art Tatum on piano, Thelonious Monk also on piano. So 3 pianists. So yeah, I like Chet Baker a lot. I love his. I mean, but that's just almost as a fan. I think his sound. I was listening on the radio this morning. Of his voice is so incredible. But yeah, people I would choose to listen to. I go out of my way to listen to and transcribe solos. And yeah, Bill Evans for sure. I mean, he really shaped. And because a lot of my approach with harp is dealing with the pedals. Not that we're not going back to pedals, but still, the pedals allow you to have complex harmonies, and Bill Evans is a complex harmony kind of guy. This is one of the nice things about the harp. When you think about the harp, I mean, which is an interesting question, I think. One reason to play jazz on the harp is if you play the harp. I mean, it's easier to play the jazz on the instrument rather than having to. I mean, if I had to learn how to play the saxophone now, this would be very frustrating. And so I just play on the harp because I already have a harp. But that's not the best reason. I think that a real good reason. There's 2 of them I can think of, among others. I think that the harp has a sound that it has something it can give to jazz, because like the piano, you're playing both melody and harmony at the same time. So you can play by yourself. You can interact with others, but you don't need others to be able to create a whole soundscape. And because the spacing of the strings is much closer together than the keys on the piano, you can have huge chords. I mean, even though we only use 8 fingers instead of 10, so we have only 8 notes rather than 10. Unless you're Fabrice Pierre or Sylvain Bessel, or maybe you. I don't know if you're using your 5th finger, but still. And with chords, like Bill Evans is playing, dissonance, having notes which scrape against each other, the more space you can put between them, the more beautiful they sound. Just like in a lot of things in life, people who annoy you, food tastes, the more space you can have, it goes from being annoying to being okay to being the most beautiful thing ever. And that's one of the things the harp does really well, because you can space out chords much more than you can on the piano. And the other thing that the harp does really well, just to add it in there, is that, and this goes back to what we were saying about the saxophone thing, is that there are so many saxophone players and there's so many pianists playing jazz. So when you listen to a pianist playing jazz, you're also listening to every other pianist that you've heard play jazz before, and you have to situate them together, and you think, wow, that sounds a little like Keith Jarrett. But when you listen to the harp, most people don't have a strong harp area of their brain, and so it wakes something up. They can hear it in a fresh way, and so I think this is really interesting in a way, that we as harpists have the chance to create more virgin territory, to really do some work. I mean, this goes back to the very beginning, the fast sevenths thing. It's ridiculous that I had this idea about the dominant sevenths and the fast sevenths thing, because it's only a statistical problem. If there were as many harpists as there were pianists, somebody would have found that out, many years before, and I would just go and learn it in school. But because there aren't that many harpists relative to other instruments, it's like the Wild West. There's still land out there that you can go and stake your claim and do your work. There's still work to be done, as there is in every instrument, but it's even more obvious with the harp, I think.
Well, I hope that the future students will be able to learn that in the school, according to your PhD.
Yes, that'd be very nice. Yeah, maybe the fast seventh is the last thing, actually, that has to be learned in the harp, and then it's just done now. Sorry, that's it. I got the last seat. No, of course there's lots. No, but that's the proof that there's still things, and I still have ideas about it. And what's interesting, I think, is that the next generation of students who comes in, I see this everywhere I teach, that they come in and the things that you had to fight to learn in a way that were new, for them are old. They just learn it because it's just, yeah, of course we'll learn this. It goes on the list of things they have to learn. And then they're going to find something that nobody thought of before, and that'll go on the list, and so on and so on.
Okay, and how it goes for the students? So, like, how you see the steps? If somebody like I'm don't know, 7 years old, let's say, and I want to play jazz on the harp. So, what would be my steps?
If you're 7 years old, it's a little more complicated because if a 7-year-old came to me and asked me, but I think I'd ask the same question. I want to understand what that means to play jazz on the harp. Because that means that's a whole thing. What do you want to do to play jazz on the harp? What does jazz on the harp mean to you? How do you imagine that's going to be? But then ultimately there are some steps you have to do, and this is what I realized for this class. Is even though you don't have to do all of them to play. I mean, to play jazz on the harp, okay, you need a harp. For sure, you need a harp.
Wow,
you need a harp. And I think that anyone, even if they're not playing the harp, they can improvise something on the harp, and they can have fun playing the harp, and they can be satisfied playing the harp. I think you would agree with this.
We have a good example. Who was that? Dorothy? No, not the ASHBY.
No, I know you're going to think of Alice Coltrane.
Yes, no? Alice Coltrane.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, I agree. I think that because I respect as a composer, and for me, she's a composer and a pianist who had a harp, and she's doing these glissandas. And she was incredibly important. She's important for the harp because she exposed many people to the harp. And she's a harpist as well, I think. Just like I think when you move to New York, you get to decide if you're a New Yorker or not. You don't have to be born in New York to be a New Yorker. You get to decide if you're a harp player or not. And afterwards, you can decide if you're going to do all the steps that all the people do. So yeah, but when I think of her, of course she's a harpist, and of course she's a very well-known harpist. But I think of her less as a harpist than as a composer and a pianist. But you're right. I mean, somebody who has a strong musical concept. Because that's what it is. A pianist who has a strong concept and comes to the harp and isn't afraid of it is going to do amazing things, because the harp is an amazing instrument, which is really helpful.
Yeah, do you know
because of the pedals, again, it allows... yeah, go on.
Sorry, do you know this story about Andreas Vollenweider, who is also near us in
neighbor.
Switzerland, our neighbor?
Yeah.
And he started to play the harp the same day he found the harp, and so he found the harp in the store, in the antique store. He bought this harp, and the same evening he was using this harp on his concert, because he was already giving a concert, like playing the pianos, playing other instruments, and he used just the harp, and he became one of the most important the idol for the harp. History.
For sure.
So okay, we deal with that. So you need the harp, and you can basically doesn't matter how advanced your technique is, you can still use it as the jazz instrument. So okay, so we have the motivation. What is the next step?
Okay, so if you want to, the reason to, I mean, that's, I have to say that to be clear. But if you really want to be a jazz harpist, what I would define this as being someone who can really play and is at ease and can repeat the things they find. Because my wife can find sounds on the harp, but I'm not sure she could explain them to somebody else, to a saxophone player. And they, what chord is that? I have no idea. It's just the red one, and to repeat and to write down or to communicate. So you have to have some kind of technique, of course. The better your technique is, the easier it is for you to get around the instrument. Theoretically, I mean, it's very useful to know your chords. They're basically, I think that there are 60 different chords. I mean, there are 5 different kinds of chords times 12 different notes that you could know. And the more comfortable you are with these chords, the easier your life is, even though you can play it. Because the dangerous thing, I think, is that people think they have to do all these things before they can play. And I think that harpists, I mean, I say harpist because I'm a harpist and because I'm dealing with harpists. So I think that harpists forget that we are playing, that we are free. We are musically free. We can do anything we want, musically at least. And yet we put ourselves in prison. We put ourselves in box saying, no, we can't do this, or we're afraid to do this. And then the number of times, I mean, in a way I'm happy. No, I'm not happy, but it makes my life easier when I see harpists who don't realize how free they are, because then it gives me a job that I can, and a calling that I can try to help them realize that they can do what they want on the harp. But it amazes me that we, and in some ways, the more training the harpists have, they get better and better and better, that they forget some basic musical things, just playing by ear, just sitting at the harp and letting their fingers move and seeing what happens, and trusting their ears, realizing that they have all these skills. Anyway,
Great.
But it's useful to have these chords. So I say that so that people don't think they have to do these things in order to play jazz.
Okay.
But the clearer you are in your harmonic thinking and your rhythmic thinking, the freer you will be in your life. So that's why it's not a bad idea. So to learn your chords, to be comfortable with your levers or your pedals, to be rhythmically present, to have flexibility between your hands.
Any way to improve? Rhythmic?
Yes, have the way to improve. I think this is my here it is in my head. I think the way to improve the rhythm is the egg, which I use all the time. People who have taken lessons with me, this shaker egg, with the stuff inside. Mm-hmm. This, I think, is the secret to everything, to life. No, to musical life, because I was thinking about how I work in my rhythm all the time, and how harpists have a reputation, I think, for not being the most rhythmically, adept people. Yeah, I mean, even though I think, we all have our issues, but I think that's not. People don't say, "Wow, the harp! Wow, what solid rhythmic you guys must have." Yeah, that's not different. And so then I thought, well, maybe it'd be better if we were percussionist. Maybe we should just become percussionists, because then it could achieve two things. If we became percussionists, then of course it would help our rhythm sense, and also if we identify as not only harpists but percussionists, then that would in a way pollute the rhythmic capability of percussionists and bring their level down. Just like I did when I got my Swiss passport with my French. Statistically, I lowered the level of French in Switzerland a little bit. So it's the same thing. If harpists become percussionists, then the level of rhythmic exactness of percussionists will lower a little bit. So then we'll be better relative to percussionists. But that's just seriously though. I thought if we were living part of our lives as percussionists, it can only do good stuff for us. And then I thought about this shaker egg and how I realized that it could really go into my rhythmic concept of if you're playing a piece where the lowest common denominator is the eighth note, and you have take. You also have take. And I realized this is like an organic metronome, that by using this, maybe with a real metronome as well, to keep the time or to be able to slowly raise the time, and then to play at the same time with either hand. And that's our big advantage over flute players, for example, is that we can test our left hand, test our right hand, and it gives you lots of information, to rhythmic information, and you can tell when your focus is going, basically. And you can tell where there's fingering problems, because it's amazing to me when I'm playing a piece and I think, doesn't seem to be working. Then I'll break out the egg on harp or on piano or whatever I'm doing. Then, and it's often where I'll say, well, it must be here the problem, because my right hand's doing this thing here. And so I'll play the right hand with the egg, going like, wow, it seems like it's working. Well, the left hand's doing basically nothing, just like boom, chink, boom. I'll test that, like, oh, wait, the left hand's all over the place. I can't keep the egg going while I'm doing this silly left hand. Why is that? And so it gives you a point of view, and I think I just think it makes you stronger. And so if I could say something to myself at 7, I mean, I try to do this with my nephew, who is also 7, but he will not listen to me. So maybe it's something we have to learn, many years later. But this is the rhythmic secret, which I will tell you all. Now you know.
Well, we know. That's a good thing, and I absolutely think that the rhythm is one of the most important issues right now in the modern harp playing. Many composers use the harp as just abstract instrument with a lot of rubato, a lot of arpeggios, and that became a cliche. And only, like if you analyze the partitures of Stravinsky, for example, there you can see that the harp goes more to the in a way of drum section. Then, like normally, it goes to the woodwind section or the strings, but there it's obviously that many times harp just interacting with drums, and that's important. Like Stravinsky had that opinion of the harp as the rhythmical instrument, and this is something what other composers just didn't have at all. Like Tchaikovsky, he used the harp just to make this magic. Yeah. Well, and books. Just before we have a possibility to download or buy your PhD and your books, what would be the books to find and read, if you can?
Well, yeah, there is one book that I really like. I have to just look it up. It's not actually not a harp book, but this is the book that helped me the most. It's called the Jazz Piano Book.
Jazz Piano Book, yeah, I know that.
By Fred Levine, I think. This, for me, is the book that I learned the most things from. He also wrote a very good theory book called the Jazz Theory Book. I think he's a very good writer about jazz, but he's not so skilled about naming his books, because it's just what it is. And then, yeah, for me, these are the most interesting books. There are other books out there. I don't find one necessarily that I think, this will really... I mean, it's always interesting. Stella Castellucci, who was a harpist who was at that very first jazz festival, who lives in California, she wrote one of the very first jazz harp books. It's a huge red book called An Approach to Jazz and Popular Music for the Harp, I think. It's huge. And I haven't read the whole thing because it's huge. But I found some interesting stuff there. There's a new book that I like by one of my students. Maybe that's why I like it. Now she's a colleague because she was my student for many years. Marcella Carbone. She's a colleague. She's not one of my students. She's my ex-students. But I'm very proud of her, so I still think of her as a student. And she just wrote a book, a jazz harp method book, which I think is really good. And it talks about a lot of different things and things that I agree with, some of which because we talked about them together. But I think that, I don't find, I think it's good to read all the books you'll find. You can find them all. But I don't find the thing that changes the world, I don't think, yet.
Okay. And music literature, sheet music, what you would...
Sheet music, there's a piece by Robert Maxwell I really liked when I was coming up called Harping on a Harp. This I thought was really great. Used a lot of pedal slides. He was a composer. He wrote a lot of things for TV, and he was active, I think, other things as well. Harping on a Harp was a piece I liked a lot. I like the Fire Dance. That's not a jazz piece, but Robert Maxwell. No, Robert Maxwell. Who is it by Fire Dance?
Fire Dance. You mean which one? There's a few.
From the David Watkins. From the
David Watkins
Suite.
Yeah,
this was great for me. I had a lot of fun playing that when I was. I also liked, I have to say, the Pearl Shertock Round the Clock Suite. Even though I have some questions about the way it's notated now, but I think it's a really good piece, actually. It's not, because I know we talked about this piece for St. Petersburg and so on. But
yes.
There are pieces out there. Deborah Hefton Conant's stuff is good. I have some pieces, of course, which I like because I wrote them. But yeah, I think anything else that I would talk about off the top of my head. There's a lot of stuff out there, but things that changed my life, I'd say definitely Harping on a Harp, the Petite Suite, and the Pearl Shertock.
No, that's great. I was actually reading Pearl Shertock, and I found out that. So for me, I need to say my opinion about the jazz. That I'm trying not to touch jazz so much because, first of all, I think that it needs a lot of background. There is so many musicians playing kind of jazz without even knowing, as you say, the harmonies, without just going into the structure of the jazz, just using few chords, and that sounds like jazz, but it's not like really jazz because it's full world. So I'm not trying to go there, but I'm very inspired by a lot of great players who do that. And one of the highlights of that last year, which was emotionally very special for me was the moment when we played together on
I
the
was going to say,
stage. Yes,
yeah, because this was very fun. But I think, it's very interesting what you say. The part of the problem is it all touches on the power of the harp. I think that people playing jazz in the way that they play it, however they want to play it, this is fine. There's no problem. And even if they don't know anything about chords, it's also fine. The problem is, if it's a problem, the issue is that because people in the general are fascinated by the harp, sometimes it happens that people who on other instruments wouldn't have a stage, have a stage, I think. And I don't think it's a problem because ultimately it will work itself out with time. But it's true that sometimes I hear harp concerts and I think, it's not so great, this jazz that I'm hearing right now. Why is this in a hall?
Yep.
And I think it's because of the power of the harp. And we benefit from the power of the harp. The people love the harp much more than they love the oboe, for example. So we can't complain when it works for somebody else. But what you're saying there, I mean, yeah, because you brought to. Because I don't think of you as a jazz harpist, but you could be. Of course you could. If you decided that you wanted to define yourself that way and put in that stuff, why not? I mean, today you could decide, and that would be, then you would live that reality, whatever that means to you. It's up to you. But of course, you've had great technique, fast ear. I mean, you have these different skills, and so that's what I experienced. And also for us, it was a nice, because as you say, we don't meet that often, even though now we live all the time in the same country. So it was really a nice hang. Like that was perhaps our most intense conversation, were these pieces we played together.
Exactly, and as I remember, we played. You started that project with Fabrice Pierre. That one harpist plays classical music, and you play the jazz variations around it. So all the music slowly turns to be like spiced by jazz and still recognizable, but much more complex. And we played Handel, and we played Chopin, I think. And you also remember you played Ravel, Debussy, and Hindemith?
We did Hindemith and also Berio. For me, the Berio was the most interesting thing to play with Fabrice. Yeah, because you were there. For the moment, with this project, we've done one official concert, and we played some other things as well with Fabrice. But because for me, I mean, Berio wrote this piece for the sequenza for Fabrice's father, or at least he was one of the first people to play this, and Fabrice grew up, knowing Berio. So he really has this piece, everywhere in his life. And so to be able to have a conversation like our conversation, but with Fabrice Pierre about Berio. I mean, to study I haven't done this, but to study Berio with Fabrice would be an amazing experience. It's on my list of things to do. I haven't done it yet. But to be able to have a musical conversation, to have the luck, the privilege to be able to just improvise around. And this also says a lot about you, but also about Fabrice, that because it's not the easy role when you have this duo of one person just playing what they're going to, the normal notes, as they say, and then the other person improvising around. People seem, in my experience, to be impressed by the improvising role. They think this is the creative and crazy, like wow, and the classical player is the straight guy, and that the funny one is the improviser. But it's the other way around, I think. For Fabrice or for you to hold steady, to be in, because of course you're influenced by the things I propose, but you have to keep going, and you also propose things that changes how you play. So with Fabrice, with the Berio, what was really interesting is that I basically set up a bass line for him with some chords so that his Berio notes sounded like he was improvising on top of my structure. So my freeness was providing a fake structure, and his written notes were the seeming freeness. So this was this back and forth, and of course this worked well because he has such a strong musical sense and a strong rhythmic sense. So he was able to place things in a way that it made a lot of sense. I mean, he, like you, is somebody who, if he chose, could be a jazz harpist. But for the moment at least, have taken different paths.
Well, that's true, and I highly recommend to everybody to follow that experience and try to get together and just improvise on top of each other, because this is so great training for the ears, for the rhythm, for the feeling between the musicians. So I really appreciate that. Well, that was really really great, and I have this now motivation to play the jazz. But I have the question, which is out of any topics we were talking. It's not about the harp. It's basically about the way we live our lives. So we travel a lot. We play in different places, and so for example, there is random musician. And he's listening now to us. Do you think that musicians, all of them, doesn't matter how famous they are, how much they play, they have possibility to change something in the world? What you think it could be, and what you think you are trying to change or show?
Okay. So just to make sure I understand. So do I think that musicians can change something in the
Yes.
world? What would that be? And what am I changing?
Yes, exactly.
These are big questions. Okay. So yeah, I mean, of course I think that musicians change things in the world. I mean, sometimes it also depends on the energy I have each day. When I have little energy, then I think, well, what am I doing? What am I doing? But no, for me, luckily, I've always been in this world. I found this at the right moment, and it's really who I am. So, but I think we do change. I think we can change things in the world by modeling a certain kind of creativity, by making interacting on a very deep level with invisible things, because that's what music is. Invisible. I mean, it's not inaudible, but it's invisible, and yet it exists. And I think it's a way of communication that, yeah, I think that's the real thing about music, is it somehow, even though it sounds silly to say, but it's true. It touches people. It allows you to communicate with musicians and non-musicians instantly. So I think that by traveling around and doing this job, we are helping to model this possibility. Yeah, that's I think what's happening as far as, yeah.
That's an important moment. And for you, what is for you? I mean,
well, for me, I'm just trying to figure it out. I mean, I feel like, as I said, I think I was really lucky that everything sort of, my parents were supportive of my music playing, that I happened to be in Arizona when a harpist happened to be there and start a new harp program, that Karen McLaughlin happened to be teaching in Tucson at the University of Arizona, that all these things happened to happen, so that I was able to have this path. And so what I'm trying to do, honestly, is not to pay back necessarily, but in a way, yes. But I feel like there's some that I can help to push the level of the harp playing. I can help to fix or help to evolve a little bit this thing, because there are certain parts of harp playing, of music making, which are sort of obvious to me that they need to be slightly more advanced or in a different way, and I think I can help people to find that. And it's lucky just because it's just statistical luck. A long time ago in this harp column interview, I said it's like getting to invent a toaster. Like if you came into a situation where in this other alternate world, for some reason they hadn't thought to invent the toaster, and you knew that that this thing existed, you could invent the toaster, and then people like, oh my God, that's so brilliant, toasting the bread. So I feel like sometimes in the harp world, because of the statistic rarity of harpists, that we get to invent toasters. And so that's kind of what I want to do. And it's also a selfish thing, because I find that playing this music that I get to, when it's in the right situation, it takes all of my energy. It takes all of my skills, that I get to juggle all these things at once. Being on stage, dealing with the energy of the audience, and with my own stuff, it takes all my concentration. And I like to work when I have to be focused at 120%. I mean, when I'm on stage, it's just me, but I'm also playing this character that it only works when I can be, when it's right, 120% or so. And then afterwards, I always think, after almost every concert where this happened, I always think, oh yeah, now I figured it out. Now I'm going to do all these, and then I fall asleep. Because you can't maintain this 120%. Maybe you can. This 120% all the time. I feel like you live your life often 120%. But yeah, so selfishly, it's because it really satisfies me to do this work. But it only works because it involves this interaction with other people. So I hope it's not completely selfish. Well, and that's what I try to do.
Cool. Sometimes in the interviews, I hear from the harpists that they are not cooking, they're not, I don't know, playing ping pong, they are not tying their shoes, I don't know, but just because the fingers are very fragile and they don't want to hurt them and so on. So speaking about toasters, how you got to this firework job?
My fireman stuff.
Fireman stuff, yes, exactly. What? And how it works for the hands. For the hands.
Well, I try not to think about that too much.
Okay.
And so far so good. Yeah. No, I mean the fireman thing was always sort of my dream. It was a passive dream. It wasn't. But my whole childhood I played fireman all the time, and there were always these demonstrations for the local fire department. I was really looking back. I realized I was fascinated by this, and there's so many photos of me, in fireman situations. And and in the U.S., at least in the places I was living, like in New York or in Arizona, there was no volunteer fire department. But in Switzerland, at least in this part of it, it's all a volunteer thing at different levels. There are 2 different levels of firemen now, at least in this region. So you have and even the ones who are the higher level, I'm in the second level, with the face masks and the bigger fire trucks, they also have other jobs, except for a few people are only firemen. But it's really this militia thing. So unfortunately, it took me many years to realize that it was really. I couldn't believe it was possible. So I spent 6 years in Switzerland thinking, like, is it really possible? I can't believe they would want a harpist. No, not really. But then we moved to this small town. Even then it took me a couple of years, like, really? Until finally I went and spoke with our neighbor who was the fire chief at the time. I said, hey, so is it possible? He said, yeah, I'll sign you up. I'm like, really? So, and luckily I have to be here at a time when, especially for my schedule now, I sort of got in when it was still easy to get in, because now it takes a lot more time to get in, which is unfortunate for me because it means you have a better training. But for the hands, okay, your question was about the hands. The thing is, there aren't that many fires in our part of Switzerland. There are some fires. I've fought some fires, and I've fought that there's flood, and there's different jobs we do. And I've been a fireman for a little over 10 years now. And so I've been to, in that time, because I'm gone a lot of the time, but I've been to 4 or 5 big fires. And then, but you wear gloves, and I don't deal with a chainsaw, for example. Have you ever cut with a chainsaw in your life? It's I did once because I was curious. I was very careful, and I realized, it's interesting. It's very powerful, the chainsaw, and it doesn't care. It doesn't care if it's a tree or your leg or your head. It doesn't care. It just wants to cut. So, okay, that's enough. I've had enough chainsaw experience. So with the fire stuff, I hope this doesn't jinx it, but I just try to be careful, and so far so good. But I don't think it's so dangerous for the hands.
Well, I think I don't know. I never was fighting the fire. I can imagine you just in that suit, running with the harp, breaking the doors with the harp. I think it's very useful. Yeah. And well,
oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. No, most of the job is dealing with hoses and dealing with water. So you're not going to burn your hands because I'm not inside because we don't have at our level we don't have the tanks with the masks. Mm-hmm. So my job has been, yes, holding a hose and squirting water on fire, and also sucking up water from a flood, and rolling up hoses and unrolling hoses. It's a lot of dealing with hoses and a lot of dealing with water, and sometimes very excitedly rushing to a place in a truck because something's going to happen. That's really exciting.
That's dramatic.
Yeah. But it's more, I'm really thankful because I got to have this sort of homeopathic, the minimum amount of time to have the maximum amount of fun of being a fireman. I don't know how long I can keep on doing it because it does take some physical stuff, and I'm not here so often. But yeah, I'm really happy I got to do this to live this little crazy dream.
Cool.
And I got to write the theme song for the fire department. That's the other thing. This is in our
yes,
region.
I remember.
You heard this.
You
I played this.
You played that on the concert. Yeah.
Yeah. This was really So now we have one big meeting of all the firefighters every year, and this is the first time that 2 times I played for this meeting where I played the march and people walked in with the flag. This last time they didn't ask me. They didn't have any live music. And I thought they'd sort of given up on this march. And I thought, well, it's okay. It was important to me, but maybe it wasn't. At the end of the meeting, suddenly they had a recording of me. I didn't realize they had this recording. And so suddenly it was my march being played by me. And it was really, I was really proud. Maybe more proud than some of the things I've done in the harp world. Because it's like, wow, it really, anyway, yeah, that's the fireman thing.
Oh, okay. So, and the last, because we are here quite long, just last thing.
And you have to edit all this.
Yes. Well, I have a last question, and that's totally related to what you said just right now. Which are the most things in your professional life which you are the most proud? Like something, the highlights. What
Wow.
keeps that fire burning? What is your highlight?
Yeah. Well, there are highlights. I mean, of course, it's the people you meet, it's people the interactions you have, and you get to play with them, and you know them in a kind of a deep way, just like with us. There have been, I'm sure it's the same with you. There are certain concerts that sometimes you know it's going to be a big deal, and other times you don't realize how important it is until afterwards. There's these constellations of friends, these different communities that you can live in simultaneously because we're traveling around and interacting with all these different groups. So somehow the harp world allows us to have, I think, a richer life. But yeah, I don't know. I think as far as one thing, I mean, it also depends, I guess, on projects which took a lot of time to put together. Like there was a concerto. I haven't done a lot of concertos with orchestra, and I did the European premiere of this concerto a couple of years ago in Baden-Baden. And for me, that was a big deal.
Which one?
It was called The Legends of the Old Castle by Lee Bracegirdle. It was played in Australia for the World Harp Congress. So that was the world premiere. But then it was written. It was nice because I think my official answer for your question is that the thing that keeps me going is the community and the being in all these different, just the musical friendships and friendships. I have a feeling that's the answer. But this was interesting because this is a piece which was written about this Aeolian harp, this wind harp, which is hanging in the castle in Baden-Baden. This wind harp was created by Rudiger Oppermann because back in the day they had a wind harp there, and they hired him to make one now. Rudiger's wife is harpist in this orchestra, and they hired, I think, is that how it worked? They hired this composer to write a piece. He wrote a piece about that harp. And there's all these connections. In the end, she didn't want to play it because it was too much. I don't know why exactly, but they asked me to play it because I have relationships with them and over the years. So it was and it was the first time I played a piece like this, and I decided I was going to do it by memory, it was really complicated. I wasn't sure I could. That's what I think. That's what it is. It's the community, but it's also when you do something that you're not sure you can do it, and that happens every so often. Like for me now to do a solo jazz concert, I know I can do it because I've done it, many, many times. And it will be a little bit different, a little bit the same. But that was one of those rare things where I was able to focus together, 6 months of really intense work. And even on the day of the concert, I still wasn't sure it was going to work because I wasn't sure that my memory was going to work in that way. I was using skills in a different way. So that's something that keeps the fire burning, I think. It's when it's really challenging. Or like this project I'm doing now with this composer in London that we're sending things back and forth, and it's using all my skills, and you never quite know how it's going to be. So no, but in the end, I think it's about the communication and the people somehow. I mean, because each thing I've mentioned here is also linked to a personal connection. So that's my official answer. That's what keeps the fire burning.
Great.
Is the friendship.
Great. Wow. That's a good words because we are all looking actually for that fire, and sometimes we are just looking in the wrong places. Some people, and for each person is different. Someone is seeking fame, someone seeking power, or just exchange of the talent for money for a good rate. Sometimes we don't have it at all. And I see, like, especially in the United States, I see that people are much more accurate about exchanging the music for money because there are quite wealthy people just doing what they do, but they know how much everything costs. Every single every single note, every single action, every single concert, and that's important. But if I think if we want to go deeper and do the music, like compose the music, do the music you do, is something just not about those things which you can count, is about the friendship, community, just world around us.
Yeah, we can talk about money as well, because of course that also, and this is a very complicated thing. How do you live your life as a musician? I mean, for me, the money question is more that for me to be able to live this life in which I have the luxury of focusing on these problems or these situations, I have to not also be a plumber, because I can't do both. Both are full-time jobs, and so the money is, there has to be a way to convince enough people that they need to give me to pool their resources so that I can do this thing, and you know, so far luckily it's kind of worked somehow. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really complicated thing. How do you put together art and money, and how do you make it work? And yeah, I don't say that it's all. I mean, of course, this list you gave. I mean, I also deal with this as well. We're all human. We all want to be loved and be somehow have fame and somehow have money. But if I'm really honest, because this is a moment where we can really talk about deep things, in the end, it doesn't really matter. What matters is this connection, I think.
Yep. Well, yeah. I also, you know, right now, as you know, and because I was talking about that before, I'm trying to do it a little bit different. I'm trying to make that Patreon works. So the people just supporting me for what I'm doing. And if it all works and more people will come and more people will join that solution for me, and then it will just give me some more freedom. So I think that's freedom what we are seeking. The money, we get the money for our job and we buy freedom.
Somehow,
yeah. That's a very...
Yeah, because we're all playing with time somehow. This amount of time we have to be alive and in our different chapters of our lives and so on. But yeah.
Great. Well, I don't want to finish that conversation on the word like money, but
we can go back to friendship. But
yes, let's go back to friendship. Yeah, but I think that first of all, it's important to have the motivation to improve. And right now I want just to buy that drum egg, and I want to experiment with the jazz, get some music, just play for improvise and so on, because the path and the way you do, the way you go, is something just real. It's not this fairy tale story which you think like, oh my God, those musicians, how they get to that level. It's something like with the magic, or just they met the right producer and then they somehow develop. But everything what you do, you are like real person. And that's much more motivating than just, spirits around us. So I'm very thankful that you shared a lot of thoughts, and I hope also our public was inspired as much as I did.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you very much for inviting me for this. I'm proud to be part of this project. Well, and it's fun. It's fun to talk about stuff. I mean, of course, this is, just like our duo performance. This was a nice hang.
Well, I hope we will have another chance to play together. I think next week, if everything goes good, on Thursday, I will leave my house with the harp, and I will walk your direction. I will go to Neuchâtel, just walking.
Come on over.
Walking the down to town. So the first stop will be Basel. Then I go to something Solothurn and Biel, something like this, and then I come to Neuchâtel in 5 days walking. But I will also share with you the map, so maybe we will meet somewhere on the way.
Perfect.
That could be really great.
We can have
thank
a fondue and a play.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and
thanks, Sasha.
We talk soon.
We talk very soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody.